All right, we got a green light here. I'm going to call the Blake Mills Public Works Board October 10th, 2023 meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Picard?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mr. Polachek?
Here.
Mr. Beekle?
Here.
Ms. Schmager?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is correction and/or approval of the minutes of August 8th, 2023. Anybody make some corrections or making a motion to approve?
I move approval of the minutes of August 8th, 2023.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, minutes are approved. Item 4, questions and public comment. See anything? So moving on, I'm going to, is the director's report, but because I know Tom Beekle has to leave in less than an hour, I'm going to ask, Tom, would you like it if we move the director's report later and had future meeting dates and times and wastewater treatment plant before that? Would that help you out, Tom?
That's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right, if there's no objection from anybody else on the board here, then we'll do that. And then we now have the next item, discussion on future meeting dates and times. And as I mentioned, Tom has a conflict, and that's why this item is on the agenda. So the town board meeting is typically also the second Tuesday at 7 p.m. So that's the conflict. The city staff, I think, has looked to see what other dates could work. So if you can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, so for second weeks of the months, the room should be generally available on Wednesdays. We would have to avoid first and third Wednesdays because that's when court is held in the chamber, and then obviously Tuesdays are typically busy as well. So Wednesdays is probably, the second Wednesday is a safe date, a safe day, I should say, where the room is generally available. The second Thursday, it typically is, but those would be the 2 days we'd probably want to focus on.
So does anybody have any preference? Would Wednesday work for everyone, or does Wednesday not work for somebody?
It's fine.
What time Wednesday?
It could be 6 or it could be 7, I would think, would be both good times.
Well, I have a problem at 7 on Wednesdays.
Okay,
6 is fine, 5 is fine.
so sometimes they do go longer than an hour.
I know,
So the other option would be earlier on Tuesdays too. So I guess that's,
that works too.
so,
Earlier on Tuesday doesn't work for me.
okay. How Wednesdays is similar, early is bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how early is too early for you?
6 o'clock is pushing it.
Okay. So, I don't know if, if there's Tuesday at 7 is not good, Wednesday at 7 is not good, is there any other options? Not really.
Thursday at 6.
Right. Thursday at 6? Do you say Thursday?
The room should be available on the second Thursday of the month.
Okay. Anybody with issues of, let's say Thursday and 6 works for you, Greg?
Thursday?
Yeah,
The second Thursday of every month?
yeah.
I look like I could make that work.
That's more challenging for me, but
Yeah, the only matter the board should be aware of is if we have a meeting Thursday evening, we likely won't be able to move those items on to the council meeting immediately following. We finalize packet to the best of our ability Thursday afternoon, so it would be delayed until the following month's first Tuesday meeting.
Well, I don't know. I think the importance of people being here is higher than that, so.
if Thursday works, I can
Okay.
adjust. There just might be a couple more things in the way.
So should we do Thursday at 6? Is that a consensus? All right, is that good enough for administration to change that, or do we need anything else?
Sure. Nope. We will adjust.
Did that work for Tom?
Yeah. Tom, Thursday at 6 PM, does that work for you?
Yep, fine. Works for
Okay,
me.
all right. If nothing else on that item, we'll go on to the next item. After that, discussion recommendation on proposed wastewater treatment plant. And we have a presentation here. All right.
Did you want to say anything first, Drake, or do you want me to dive right in?
I think once we get the presentation up, you can dive right in.
Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. Travis Anderson, nice to see you all again with Strand Associates. And tonight wanted to give an update and talk about next steps on the facility planning process for the wastewater treatment plant. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So what I would like to go through tonight is just a very brief background. Obviously, we've had many discussions on this over the past couple of years, but I do want to start with just a couple slides kind of reiterating the needs of the wastewater system. And really, kind of the new information is the funding update. If you recall, when I was here earlier this year, we kind of went into a holding pattern on this topic as we were waiting to hear back on funding decisions. So I'll provide an update on that. And then we will revisit the impact on sewer rates for a couple different options, some draft sewer rates. Update on potential rule changes that DNR is bringing forth, and then wrap up with next steps. Okay, so a little bit of background here. If you recall that there are needs for major upgrades at the current wastewater treatment plant. The infrastructure at the plant has aged to the point where much of it is either beyond its useful life from an age standpoint, or it is under capacity, or both. There are lower phosphorus discharge rules that the plant has gotten into a variance for in the near term, but the variance is not a permanent solution. It will expire, and there will need to be a permanent solution identified for phosphorus discharges. And generally, as we all know, effluent limits get more stringent as time goes on. So there will likely be other future limits, particularly total nitrogen. That'll likely be the next big item that DNR will bring forth now that phosphorus has been implemented. The plant needs to accommodate future increased flows and loads. There's a capacity shortfall for liquid sludge storage. Again, city growth from both residential, commercial, and industrial sources need to be served. There is a potential that the stream would be reclassified, which could result in more stringent effluent limits, which is an advantage of going to that larger effluent discharge point such as the Crawfish River. And then finally, your geographical constraints. I think we're all aware the plant is pretty locked in with it being located within the city, making expansion a challenge. So the two major options that we've been evaluating here are staying at the existing site, which would require major upgrades and a lot of investment into that infrastructure, or to go to a new wastewater treatment plant outside the current city area with a discharge to the Crawfish. So really a do-nothing option isn't available here. There needs to be some major investment. It's just a matter of where that investment is going to take place. Next slide, please.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
We had discussed the one particular type of product, was that the AGS? Is that the one?
Yes. Yep.
Where I believe it was, I would have classified it as a new wastewater treatment plant on the current location as a possibility. Is that not a point of consideration?
Yeah, we will talk about, I have a slide on that tonight.
Okay, so that's, 'cause it's kind of in between it kind of swings on across both of these?
Yes, that's
Okay.
kind of a hybrid option, and I have a slide on that tonight to talk about that.
Okay. It was just written here, I'm interpreting this particular slide, as when I read this, I didn't see that option as an option on this
There's
background slide is all. Being
There's
a little picky, but
actually, in order to stay at the existing site, there's no choice but to adapt a new technology. So upgrades at the existing site would entail upgrading to a new technology.
okay. And I'm classifying that as new, just for my vernacular, rather than it being an upgrade to the old. So it was just it's a technical point, but I was a little confused just getting started. So I wanted to make sure that I was on the right page.
Yeah, when I say new versus existing, I'm talking about just the location.
Okay, thank you.
So again, you're seeing that terminology here. The new would be a new location, existing would be the existing location. And the green is to indicate a positive, and the red is to indicate a negative. So there's a lot of advantages to a new location. The greater ability to respond to growth. The cost is really the biggest impact, and more so the rate impact than the cost, because again, the investment at the existing location is significant. But as I'll talk about, the rate impact is really what is a bigger difference from a monetary standpoint, because at a new location, the investment would occur nearly all at once within a few year period, whereas if you stay at the existing site, there is a potential for phasing in improvements. And then the rest of these are kind of, there'll be challenges for the existing site, and it's not that we can't overcome those challenges, it's just that we all go in, eyes wide open as to what those challenges are. Having enough space for sludge storage, constructability, those regulatory effluent constraints, proximity to residential commercial areas, that's an important one. Obviously, the plant is already very close to residential areas, and expanding it will just make it, even closer to those land uses. Public relations is kind of a toss-up, and then just strategically being able to expand to meet the city's needs moving forward is more of a challenge at the existing location. Next slide. So funding updates. The city has been notified that the congressionally directed funding that was requested will not be available. So that's what kind of prompted bringing this back before the board is that the city was notified of that news, that funding would not be available. We've also looked into the latest information that's been available from the Clean Water Fund. So the DNR issues a intended use plan with a scoring system every year. That draft was issued about a month ago with revisions to the scoring system. So we evaluated eligibility for grants through the Clean Water Fund based on the latest data, the latest scoring system, and confirm that, as was the case last year, the city is still not eligible for those grants. The city would be eligible for loan funding through the Clean Water Fund program, but not the Principal Forgiveness Grant program, and which is primarily based on population and median household income. I also had a meeting with the USDA. There is, there's funding program for this type of project through the USDA, and I can confirm that grants would not be available again due to the city's MHI through the USDA, and they have a higher interest rate than the Clean Water Fund program. So it's likely that USDA would not be used on this project. So what we've done is we have draft sewer rates that have been calculated for the new treatment plant, and then for an option to stay on the existing location. And the assumptions that were made for that is that Clean Water Fund loan funding would be used, but that there have been no grants that have been put towards those costs because none have been identified as eligible to date. So just some comments on the draft rate impact before we look at the numbers. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of benefits of going to a new site, but really the rate impact needs to be carefully considered given the magnitude of the changes. And just from a pure technical standpoint, it would be more advantageous to go to a new site on the Crawfish River. There's a lot of advantages to that if we ignore the financial aspects. But when we look at the rate impact, it appears that it might be prohibitive without that federal funding, congressionally directed funding that was requested and that it appears will not be received. So really that final decision needs to be balanced between the flexibility that the new site offers and the impact to the ratepayers. Next slide, please. So an option to mitigate the rate impact would be to remain at the existing site. And like we were just talking about, evaluating a new technology such as aerobic granular sludge allows for a smaller footprint. So that would allow some city growth, much more city growth to occur while staying at the existing site compared with going to a new site. And the advantage from a rate standpoint is that you can develop a phased plan for staying at the existing site and expanding over many more years compared to moving to a whole new site. But the needs at this site at the existing location are significant. The overall cost of this program for updating for the city's wastewater needs and for future growth, the costs are comparable when you look at it for construction on the existing site and construction on a new site. Because to meet all the city's needs and to meet growth, you're basically constructing a new plant on that existing site. So it's not necessarily that you are saving a ton of money by staying on the existing site. It's that you're spreading out the cost over a much longer period, which will hopefully allow your rate base to expand, which will then reduce the rate burden on each ratepayer. So the details of how phasing would be implemented exactly still needs to be determined. I'll show an example, but that would be the purpose of this facility planning document that would be the next step, is the details of exactly what is in the first phase, what would be in the second phase, would be put in that facility plan and submitted to DNR for approval. That's really our next step in the process, if that is the path that moves forward. So here's a draft rate impact comparison of a phased approach at the existing treatment plant site versus going to a new location and constructing a new treatment plant site. And again, this is just one example. This could be done in many different ways, but this is one scenario that I've come up with. And I just want to touch on the assumptions first, because there are many, many different assumptions that we can, put into a table like this. So what I've done is I've assumed 1% annual growth in sewer customers. That adds to that rate base, which increases revenue. It only includes this project's costs. These numbers have not been adjusted to account for inflation. And like I mentioned, this is just one possible scenario. So the main difference here is that phased approach really ramps up the sewer bills much more slowly compared with the new location approach. So if you look at the percentages, that would be the annual increase in the sewer rate. And then I've got the monthly bill for just an average residential user. That's obviously going to vary depending on how much water they're using. But for the new treatment plant option, it really ramps up, and in about 4 years, you're at that rate, which would be very close to the highest rate in the state, at least right now. Versus you can see you get there much more slowly with the other option, and overall, it is less costly to stay at the site. You're not purchasing land, so there is some savings on a capital basis, but you can see regardless that there is a very significant impact to the ratepayers. It's just, it occurs much more slowly in the phased approach in this example here. Is there any questions on this before we move on?
Oh, I have a question. For the new wastewater treatment plant, was sunsetting, cost to sunset the current site included in these costs, or is that an additional cost, and where does that get figured into the overall big picture?
So your question is if they move to a new location, what would be the cost for demolishing the existing?
Yeah, sunsetting
Equipment.
it, yes. So, and is that included,
That
or
is
is that
in-
an additional cost, and how does that get taken care of in a budget or in an analysis like this?
That's included in this analysis here.
Oh,
There
it
would be
is. Okay.
there'd be a cost to have a demolition contractor come in and take everything out to 2 feet below grade or something like that.
Okay, so that's already taken care of.
That's in
this
these
analysis.
costs, yes.
Oh, great,
Yep.
thanks.
So I've got a couple of questions. First is, the first line in here is for the new rates applied. The current rates are, if there was a 2023 line in here, that would be approximately $47, I believe, back calculating from your numbers that you have here.
Yes, that is correct, yep.
So the baseline is 47, is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And then the very bottom here, the 130% versus 159%, that to me says that the existing site, long-term, is lower cost than having a new site. Is that accurate? Because you've said also that the new site would have, or the existing site would have, long-term, potentially higher. So can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Yes, so, yes, it is, in this time frame, the existing site is a lower cost than the new site. Now-
Over what time frame would it not be?
Well, that would depend on city growth, and I have a chart that kind of shows how far you can get with this. At some point, if the city keeps growing and growing and growing, at some point down the line, you're going to run out of space here, and you're either going to have to start expanding beyond the current parcel boundaries, or you're going to have to move the plant. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's well over 50 years from now, even in a high-growth scenario. I mean,
Depending on industries, yeah, it's really difficult to put a time frame on
You're
it.
talking about increasing the population equivalent by a factor of 4. That's what you're showing
Yeah,
for the
correct.
current site.
Yep.
A population equivalent of 30,000. So it's way out there,
Yeah.
right? Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, next slide, please. So, yep, here are the population projections that we were just kind of touching on. If we were to just purely go by Department of Administration, they would say use 1% annual growth for the city. That's their projection. If we look at the fastest growing communities kind of around the Madison area, that's about 2.5% annual. Your current growth rate is about 1% annual, and that doesn't account for any new industries. That's just the residential population growth. And then you can see what those numbers extrapolate to in the future under each of those scenarios. So this is a slide we presented in the past, just showing it again for reference here. And here that's shown a little bit more graphically. So you've got current population shown on the left-hand side there, and on the bottom are the capacities converted to a population equivalent basis for various processes at the existing treatment plant site. So your influent pumping and screening is already pretty much at capacity, followed very shortly behind by some other processes such as the clarifiers and RAS pumps. And then, the next big process to hit capacity would be the oxidation ditches. And in green, it's just an example showing how industries can significantly impact the capacity that's used at the wastewater plants. So these are real examples from southern Wisconsin, an example food packaging facility and an example hospital, and the equivalent population that they would have an impact for at the wastewater plant. So, if you had one packaging facility come in, that could use up the rest of your capacity for all processes at the plant. Or, if you had a hospital come in, that would be a major impact. That would almost be a 50% increase in the loadings that you see right now. So you want to have some flexibility for these types of entities when you're considering growth in the equation.
Question?
Can we go back?
Since the 2022 numbers are larger than the population of Lake Mills, I take it that this includes the township that's also on our sewer lines?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And just to clarify, if a large user would quote unquote come in, we have the choice of saying yes or no to such a user, correct?
Correct. Any other questions on this one?
I would just confirm for the council or the board that our January 1, 2022 population was 6,452. Our January 1, 2023 population was 6452 for 2022, and then 6693. So our recent experience is higher than the growth numbers that you're seeing in the projections.
What was that second number? Was that a 2023 number?
January 1, 2023 is 6693. That's the DOA, Department of Administration Municipal Population Estimate.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here is one possible example for phasing in improvements at the existing site location, and I'll walk through this. So the most urgent needs at the existing site would be influent pumping, preliminary treatment, which is screening and grit removal, and UV disinfection. So that's what you're seeing in the orange color there. So that would be an immediate project that would move forward once facility planning is complete. And then the next phase would increase the capacity for higher loadings at the plant. And that would be accomplished through the addition of in this example here, the aerobic granular sludge system, the AGS system that you visited, or some of you visited in Rockford. So that will basically double the capacity of the plant at that point. They would run in parallel to the existing oxidation ditches in this example. And then the other major component of Phase 2, shown in red, north of Stony Road there, would be converting from liquid sludge storage to sludge dewatering and drying. And the reason for that is due to the limited footprint that's available at the existing location, there's not enough room for liquid sludge storage. You need to reduce the volume to meet the DNR storage requirements. So you are doing that by first dewatering the liquid sludge, taking it from 3 or 4% up to maybe 20% solids, and then drying that to maybe 90% solids. So you're cutting down the volume by about 90% roughly in that scenario, which again, due to the space constraints, you need to move to some of these different technologies if you want to stay on the existing site and continue growing. That's the flip side of staying at this location. It will require some of these different technologies. And then in Phase 3, we have effluent pumping to the Crawfish River. We've discussed numerous times how it's more advantageous to have an outfall on the Crawfish River versus Rock Creek because of the less stringent limits. The timing of that could be decided based on regulatory constraints that get imposed by DNR, depending on the timing of those, and what's ultimately decided regarding your final approach to phosphorus treatment. And then beyond Phase 3, you're now beyond the 20-year planning horizon. Really, Phase 4 or future phases would occur as needed based on growth. Phase 4 is not included in the draft rate projections that I showed. Phase 4 would be as needed theoretically beyond 20 years from now. When you need more capacity, you would demolish the existing oxidation ditches, and you would add however many more AGS reactors you would need based on residential and industrial growth that you were trying to accommodate at that time. Any questions on that?
So this doesn't include utilizing the city-owned property adjacent to the current wastewater treatment plant, correct?
Which property are you talking about?
Where the electric substation used to be.
No, we're not. No, that is not used in what I was just showing.
That could be available for future use potentially if needed.
It could be, yes. So then what I just showed on that aerial photo with the phasing is showed here from a population standpoint. What phases would get you to which population. So you can see in that Phase 1 through 3, when you've got when you've got the 3 new AGS reactors installed, plus the oxidation ditches running in parallel with them, it gets you to about that 17,000 population equivalent capacity. And then when we add in all those other AGS reactors and demolish the oxidation ditches, that would get you to a population equivalent of about 30,000. So, within that footprint that I was showing on the previous slide, you could get to about 30,000 population equivalent.
So is there a way to marry that slide with the slide two previous ones where you have an industry such as if you were going to add a food packaging?
Mike, please.
Is there a way to add the slide that you just had up there?
You would see if you go back to the, Dave, if you go back to the, let's see, slide 10.
Yeah, they're not numbered.
10 of the one that says existing wastewater treatment plant capacity, NR 110 code.
If you married those two slides and you superimposed your food packaging facility into this slide, where do you fall in terms of capacity limits?
It depends how much industry you moved in.
I realize that, but is there a way to project what that would be?
Dave, can you go back 2 slides?
Yeah, go back to, okay, is there a way to marry this slide with the slide that was just up?
So,
Do you have a population equivalent for a
I
hospital
mean,
or
you're
a
doing it for
package?
population. Can you do it for productivity?
Do you have a population equivalent for a hospital?
that's this here.
So is it the area? Is it?
It's about,
green.
yeah, it's about
So it's the width of that green
1,200 people.
Is that still there?
So the width of the green box is it would be a step function rather than a straight line, but it'd be a 1,200 increase by the hospital. And then the example food is obviously much larger, like over 5,000 or 4,000, about 4,000?
Yeah, and again, these are
Rough.
highly variable. These were just examples that we knew of from a different client.
Maybe I'm not being clear enough, but the second slide has phase 1 through 3 in there.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, I mean, you've taken the baseline in terms of population, but is it safe to say, all right, maybe I just ask it this way, is it safe to say that by doing the improvements by the time you get to phase 3, you could add 2.5?
This is the phase 3 dot right there.
Right. And can you add about 2.5 food packaging facilities?
Yes, you could.
Okay, so I'm reading that correctly.
Yes, yep. Again, depending on your residential growth, but today's population plus those food
New
industries,
facilities.
yes, you'd have capacity for
Okay,
that.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and this is just an update, that's not really an update because DNR is still pending. So recall that they were introducing some rule changes that would impact the limits that were available on the on any new discharge to, in this case, the Crawfish River, and that would impact the BOD limits, the ammonia limits, and the TSS limits. But again, it's still pending. So those limits will need to be recalculated, and they are likely going to be more stringent than what's shown here. So it's up in the air at this point. I don't feel like this change here necessarily is the deciding factor for staying at the existing location versus going to a new location. It's just something that you should be aware of, that is kind of a moving target at this point. So last slide here, wrapping up with next steps. We talked about the benefits of the new site versus the high rate impact for that option. And if that rate increase in that amount of time was acceptable, you could proceed with site selection for a new site. If it's determined that that rate increase is prohibitive, then we would want to go the route of staying at the existing location and coming up with a strategy for phasing those improvements at the existing site, and then incorporate whatever phased approach is determined back into the sewer rate study and start implementing a new rate structure. But ultimately, the next step in the process here is to complete the facility plan that needs to get submitted to DNR and approved, and then proceeding with design of phase 1, which would be the most urgent needs that get identified and detailed in that facility plan. So I think the next immediate step out of this meeting then would be the recommendation of stay at existing site or proceed with more investigation on a new site.
Can I ask a question about there were some disadvantages that were outlined back in a deck from July of 2021. And so when we were looking at the existing water treatment plant back then, we were not looking at AGS. And so there was a whole list of those. One of them in particular, I'm not sure I understand, is we had talked a lot about the biosolids management. Would that go away with the AGS in the existing, or is that still a disadvantage to maintaining the current location using that technology?
So the biosolids challenge in the scenario that I outlined tonight would be addressed through the change to dewatering and drying. That would minimize the footprint that you need on the existing site by getting rid of all that extra volume. So that's how it was addressed in this scenario.
Thanks.
Yeah, are we still, if you upgrade at the existing location, can you still discharge in the Crawfish River? Is that an option?
Yes, that's still an option. You could still construct a force main and outfall on the Crawfish River at some point in the future. I don't know that you'd want to do that immediately in phase one, again, just from a ratepayer impact. And that brings up a good point that I didn't mention here is identifying a parcel on the Crawfish River.
Yep.
And just keeping that in mind as a strategic area in the future.
So Tom Beekle, I know you have to leave soon. Did you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make before you head out?
I don't have a lot. I mean, I guess I'm just, and this is coming from John Reich's era too, because we've talked about this in the past, and he was a previous public works board member, is we're just really frustrated why there wasn't any pushback on the DNR and EPA, because, you know, obviously there's new technology out there. It's been used in Europe extensively for years, and the savings in facility things are 30 to 50% less than, you know, going with an old standard sewage plant, and why we can't buy time until that, you know, that better technology, you know, is being used in the States, and just go with what we have until that can happen. And I don't think John, I think at the time said that there was, you know, there wasn't any pushback on that. You know, because it's kind of embarrassing to them that there's something more efficient out there and effective, and that's what they're supposed to all be about in the EPA and the DNR as far as water quality and ecology. And, you know, it could have been a really, you know, that pushback could have been, you know, very, very effective at that point in time. That's all I have. And I do have to go, so apologize.
Yeah. So I think that AGS is kind of addressing some of those issues that maybe Tom was bringing up there as far as having cleaner water. That process does clean up the water a lot more than the current technology. And it is hitting lower price points. I mean, if we look at the draft rate impact comparison that you did for us tonight, over 16 years, we're looking at, in this example, of over $5,000 of savings to the each individual property owner. Over that 16-year period, that'd be about $325 a year in savings for that resident. So that's significant in my book, but I mean, I guess those are things that we're looking at tonight. But it seems like using the current site, using the AGS technology gets us some of the advantages. It gets us out there to where we're getting close to that 30,000 in population, which is about 50 years from now. I don't know if we'll ever get there in 50 years, but that's the projection. So that seems to make a lot of sense as I look at this spreadsheet.
Yeah,
That seems,
there is a significant difference for the ratepayers, yes. I guess I just want to clarify, the capital costs themselves are similar, but when you can spread it out over the longer period of time, you know, that's what's really saving the ratepayers money, because then you should 15 years from now have a much larger base. So yeah, that's where there are definitely savings to the ratepayers for going that route.
so I think a year and a half ago when we looked at it, and the new wastewater treatment plant was going to take us to the highest utility in the state, basically, at that time. I think that kind of put us on edge a little bit and said, whoa, wait a minute, let's look at this a little bit deeper. Now, I'm sure that rates have gone up across the state over the last year, so that might not quite be the case anymore, but it still probably puts us in the top tier, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
So,
Okay.
so our current wastewater treatment plant was built in the late 80s, so it's a little less than 40 years old, I believe.
Late 80s, early 90s, right, Bill? 90.
So that's 33 years old, right? And we're talking about major redo of it. And I just want to, and it was designed with a third oxidation ditch, a 50% increase in capacity, which we're not talking about using at all at this point in time. You know, it's technology that's not the best to use for that site at this point, because technology has changed. So as far as a planning horizon, it doesn't really make sense to look out more than, let's say, 50 years. Because 50 years from now, who knows what technology is going to be available? Who knows what water-saving measures or other technologies change on the demand side? And 30,000 population equivalent gets us at least to 50 years.
can you pull up that last slide? So in the next steps, are you looking for any guidance from this board tonight, or?
Well,
Where
I
are
mean,
we?
you don't have to make it tonight. I think eventually we'll want to move forward with a clear recommendation to city council, so that they can make their determination of what they would, how they would like to proceed. So this update was, we now know, based on the best information we have right now, that outside grant funding is not coming to assist the city in this project. So our cost is going to be our cost at this point. So I think the way, I've seen it is, none of us can say with certainty exactly what the future holds. So some of it is a risk tolerance for each individual policymaker making the decision. So if we stay at the existing site and we are able to utilize that site for the next 20 to 30 years, I would say we would have made the right decision to stay at the existing site. If something were to occur as far as more stringent regulatory environments, if there was an appetite on future city councils for more aggressive growth and to accommodate more aggressive growth, or to seek out more industrial base or more employer base, then is it possible that we would run into issues decades from now that would have pushed the pendulum in the other direction? I think the answer to that can only be yes. Now, what is the likelihood of that? I can't give you that with any certainty. I would say that yes, we have control over what industry comes into the city, but there is a cost associated with saying no as well. There's a cost of employment, a cost of income, investment into the community. There's the cost of tax base versus not just ratepayers, but taxpayers, which in the case of the wastewater treatment plant are two separate entities. There's a lot of overlap, but there's also a significant amount of ratepayers that are not taxpayers. So those are the types of things to consider. I think there's a strong argument based on the rate impact we're seeing and the ability to utilize a new technology to stay at the existing site. I wouldn't say that it completely eliminates any benefit of future flexibility or capacity or just general lack of limits that come with a new site, but it comes at a significant cost burden to ratepayers based on our projections right now. So that is kind of how I see it, that if we invest in the existing site and we successfully use that existing site for the next 30 years, it's clear that the city would have made the right decision, even if after 30 years it needed to explore other alternatives as well. The risk with that is if you don't make it there for whatever reason, and that's the balance that we're striking right now. So I just wanted to lay that out for everybody and kind of explain the dichotomy between the two that we see.
A question along that line. You said 30 years. What about 15 years? You say, wow, we missed it. What is there potential for expansion? It's still on that site, and what would that look like? What would that need to happen?
Capacity in 15 years, which I'm not saying that's a likely scenario. I think we can confidently say we would have made the wrong decision to stay at the existing site. Is there opportunity for expansion? The current substation is still currently utilized. We could move what is left there to the other substation, so we could do that and expand there. We could acquire land and displace residences. We would have the ability to do that. There's a process to do that. So we could expand in that way, or pick up and move elsewhere. But again, as we've seen, a lot, we'd have to see a dynamically different environment over the next 15 years to say that would happen. I don't know that past growth for Lake Mills reflects future growth necessarily of what we might see, just because north of the interstate changes the dynamic of what's available to the city for growth. But that would be we would likely need significant industry investment over those 15 years. We're not going to get there with population alone, I would say. So if we saw an influx of wet industry investment that we wanted to take advantage of, along with the population growth, that's what would lead to that scenario. That would be a very high growth. That'd be a very dynamic time and high investment in a short period of time.
Right. Would those costs be somewhat absorbed by some of those industries too, as far as those rates that we looked at?
You can require industry to pay in order to locate, in order to build, to pay some sort of, whether it's an impact fee or some other fee that developed during a development agreement of sorts, basically saying that, like, to accommodate you, we need to do X with our treatment facilities, and then it becomes a negotiation between the developer and the city.
Dre, can I make a comment about the ratepayers? And I don't know, this is like way kind of maybe not even related, but if there's a way that you could find a way to do a cost improvement on other rate-paying services to mitigate some of the delta. I know we just took a water increase, we took electric increase, and I don't know the history. I recall, I have in my notes that we hadn't made, I believe it was electric or water increase for 8 years, which is excellent. We were holding holding flat, and so then this increase won't be added on top of additional increases. So I think understanding what a consumer would see as far as this on top of other increases might be helpful, so we understand the full impact. And then when you add the taxpayer piece, I'm a little nervous that we have the library, the school, and Sandy Beach, interest in community center, other operational interests. That's a lot of
Costs.
additional interest in asking taxpayers and community members to take on the burden. And so this is a necessity. There's the want-to-haves and then the have-to-haves, and this is a have-to-have. I mean, you have to have, this can't be a risk area where we run into trouble. And so I'm not sure how to get arms around the full picture to help see how this all looks on the big scheme of things, because it's one of many elements of what we're all having to deal with.
So it is complicated in that water ratepayers and taxpayers are going to be largely the same people. We don't have water outside. We don't provide water outside of our boundaries. Wastewater is going to be, the sewerage district that we took over by court order, plus everything that's in the city. Electric ratepayers are going to be another different group of people. So the electric utility goes farther north. It extends farther. So that's going to be the largest base of people. So in order to do, the city taxpayer is going to be the one that is all entities. It's going to be, they're going to pay water rates, sewer rates, electric rates, and city property taxes. That won't be the same for everyone else in those entities. Now, I do understand we have to balance all of the costs that we may be and projects that we may be considering, but we also have to consider that each enterprise fund, which is what the utilities are, has to be able to stand on its own. So yes, it's affecting the same people, but they're providing largely the same people with some differences, but they're providing different services, all of which, many of which are essential services. So it is difficult to say we shouldn't proceed with a water project because we have a wastewater project, right? Because they're both necessary. And so balancing those is difficult because they have to be sustaining themselves and sustaining each plant. When I say plant, I mean, what's in the ground, the whole utility, as a whole and its infrastructure. So I do agree that we have to be cognizant of the total effect we're having on everyone, but we also have to consider that other aspect that they have their own unique needs.
So if we go with the existing, we're probably looking at phase 1 and phase 2 within the first 10 years, I would guess.
Roughly, yeah.
Could we get that dollar amount? Could we understand what that dollar amount is for phase 1 and phase 2 based on current projections?
Yes, I can follow up with that. I don't have it right off the top
I
of
think
my
that
head,
might
but
help us
I can pass that along.
making a decision here.
And that number in comparison to a new site?
Correct.
So the new site cost and then the phase 1 and phase 2 costs of existing site.
Yep, I can put together a table with the breakdown of that.
Because if phase 3 is probably about doubling our population from now, which may be
Well-
15, 20 years from now.
Yeah, phase 3 was technically the outflow to the rock. So phase 4 is what
It'd be
they called
important to understand that too, I guess.
Yeah, which is, to me, the timing of that's mostly driven by regulation.
Yeah, that's why I separated it. Phase 2 and 3 could be combined if you wanted. You could do that. I have not developed costs for Phase 4. That was the 30,000 population equivalent, because that's so far out that we're kind of guessing what all would need to be required there.
And Phase 4 could even be broken up into sub-phases.
It could be,
Because
yep.
this AGS is pretty modular.
Yes, that's correct.
So does it make sense to have something like that before the next meeting, and then?
Oh,
We
absolutely,
could probably
yeah.
make a recommendation after that? Does that seem
Sounds
reasonable?
good. Is there anything that anybody else needs or would like in order to make a decision?
Well, if it were to be a new wastewater treatment plant, is there a particular type or company, or are there options that would swing cost for new? Because AGS is what we're, AGS, is that what AGS, the right letters? AGS, we're talking about for existing, but if it's new, what do we?
If it's new, really, the door is wide open, assuming that you find a decent-sized parcel. As long as you're not, buying a 1-acre parcel to try to, squeeze it in. But if you find a nice big parcel, you could go with any technology you wanted. The costs are going to be pretty similar, though. I mean, they're going to be within a few percentage of each other. So it would likely come down to city preference at that point, as far as what technology you wanted to use. There's pros and cons of each one. The AGS is more modular, but it's a new technology, right? You'd have to learn a new technology, new staff would have to get familiar with it, versus if you put in oxidation ditches, maybe it's a little less efficient, it's got a much larger footprint, but it's what you're used to. So there'd be pros and cons each way if you went to a new site.
AGS is there's currently only one provider in the United States, so I don't know if that was part of what you were asking, but that technology is currently, one company is doing it. It's a proprietary technology. That's what we saw in Rockford.
I just didn't know if there's AGS, if that would be a consideration for a new location, as well as you had mentioned, the current type of technology and with the different vendors supplying, and is there a vast cost difference and operational cost long-term? Is there, I mean,
No,
I'm not
the
familiar.
present worth, when you take into account energy use, and other costs, they're going to be within a few percentage points of each other. They're going to be very similar.
2%?
A few percentage.
A few percent,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, they're going to be very close. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thanks for the discussion, and I'll follow up with some more cost information.
Thank you, Travis.
Have a good night.
Too. Okay, that concludes our discussion on wastewater treatment plant. We'll then move back to director's report. We have a new public works director for the city here with us tonight, Mr. Randy Myram, if I said that correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
So, time for your director's report, please.
If the board members didn't mind, I am very used to including a slide presentation as I talk through what the city's been doing. So if you could start that, Dave, please.
Very good.
Since I started in August, this College Street project is underway. It is now wrapped up. We've met substantial completion. And as we run through the slides here, you'll see that they're applying the surface coat of asphalt, and they've completed most of the restoration. Things look very well. There are some issues that Dave and I are going to bring up in a punch list that are still outstanding. Now, hold on this one, please. I included this to demonstrate to the board members. Next slide, please, of before and after. That picture that you previously looked at is in front of the house in this next slide here. And so I did this to demonstrate just how good of a restoration job was performed. You can continue then, Dave, please. And yes, we'll just go through the remaining slides for College Street. This particular technician is testing the density of the surface asphalt. The surface is typically more dense than the binder course, and that is a nuclear density gauge they use. It holds a charge of cesium-137, which is nuclear, really, and but if you use it carefully, you're in the middle of it cracked. So, next slide, please. And once that was done, we continued on with completing the hydrant flushing, which is now done. And the street department's been very busy. This is up in Brookstone. Brookstone, we did a lot of mill and overlay. Dwayne was really on top of this project as I came aboard. And there was also, along with the mill and overlay, we did a good deal of chip sealing across town. But this went very well. As Dwayne and I drove through and inspected, we were very pleased with the results in most cases. We were able to utilize this new message board to good effect, I feel. This is continually warning the residents of the upcoming work and please stay off the roads. And we were able to program this from our office. And so we were able to make changes right away whenever necessary.
Nice.
And then the street department is also doing sidewalk maintenance. This is on Pinnacle Drive. This has been met with mixed results by the residents, but it is necessary often. You can just cycle through these slides, Dave, thank you. So, I'll hold there, please. With the sidewalk maintenance, there has been some issues of damaging some private property. We're dealing with some of that. Oftentimes it involves irrigation lines and things that are too close to the sidewalk. Those have been the majority of my complaints are a dog fence. The residents are informed if they do their due diligence, they can see that there is a 12-inch right-of-way from the edge of the sidewalk that they're supposed to stay out of. But I understand why that happens. But we have struck a few of those lines, and I have dealt with a number of those complaints. But overall, it's going well. Most of the sidewalk in Pinnacle is being replaced this week, and this work will continue for the next week or two.
So this Pinnacle sidewalk, the city is doing all the work, or all the work except the concrete? Or?
We are doing the demolition and removal, and
Okay.
we've contracted out the replacement.
So who does the forms, the city or the contractor?
The contractor.
Okay. And the restoration is city?
Sir?
Restoration is the city?
Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
The contract, if you recall, the contract is bid, that we do the contract, we bid it both ways. So if staff can do most of the work and they're available in their schedule, depending on what is happening in any given year, the contract with the concrete company is built both ways. So when the staff can do this, they do, obviously to save money and and make those dollars go a little further for, and again, this is repair. This is to help with trip hazards, complaints, those types of things. And the cost is then not borne by the property owners in assessment. This is part of the budget. If you recall, it's a $15,000 CIP and then a $15,000 from the assessment budget.
You can continue, Dave, please. So the electrical department has been very busy these last few weeks. They are now fully staffed. We have 4 journeyman linemen, very professional, and I'm very pleased with how they're being led and how they are operating. This was a down power line on Echo Bay Lane about 2 weeks ago. You can start cycling through these then. That they had to replace, while the lines were down, they took an opportunity to replace a deteriorating pole. And that is our foreman, TJ, who's up there on that pole. Now, this was an opportunity for training that we hosted, we in Lake Mills. A number of other linemen from surrounding communities were here. Go through the next cycle then. And they are training on recovering a injured person up on the line. And this is just some transformer work that we were installing the underground lines to a local dairy, Dolph Dairy. We did have a bit of a problem there. Unfortunately, one cow died in the process, but it was not the city's fault, so that was established. This is exciting work. This is at F&M Bank where we are bringing power to this facility. We had a couple of days of traffic control here, but everything went very smoothly. And this is one advantage Lake Mills has now with a full professional crew. We cut down on work time significantly, and the quality of work is commendable. Other projects that are going on, then Bill and his crew have been winterizing the treatment plant. This is an important job, and they're basically preparing us for the winter months. And then we have the TAP grant sidewalk project. The contractor, first I should state that the Department of Public Works is going to take the management of this project, take over the management, not using a consultant for this. This work, we might allow them to, they have reached out to me and asked if they can do a little bit this year. We are moving ahead with the understanding that if it gets too cold, then we're going to push this project to the spring. But that is all I could think to summarize for you.
What portion of the TAP grant, what streets are they thinking? Is it been determined what streets doing this year potentially on the TAP grant?
I don't recall. One second. I don't know all the street names yet. I'm sorry. So.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but which ones? If we're doing partial maybe this year, you said, right?
Yes.
The contracts are in the process of being signed, and Randy is looking to set up a pre-con with the contractor.
Yeah, okay.
I would imagine
Too early.
that we will hear a little bit more about that, their projections and their means and methods at that time. Would you not agree, Randy?
I would, yes.
Okay.
I have a question. This is something that I'm not sure that you'll be able to answer, but I don't know if you were aware that there were some electric blips that we talked about back in July, and I was just curious if that was ever resolved and we found what was happening with that. Do you remember the electric blip?
I do believe it has been resolved. They had shut down Circuit 1, if I'm talking about the correct. They have reestablished Circuit 1 after some troubleshooting, and we have not had a glip since.
Awesome.
So don't jinx it, but I think things are going well now.
Well, I'll just do a shout out for electric since you're talking about electric, because I've lived in 4 states and 12, 15 cities, and I can say that my electric has gone out on a few occasions due to trees down or some other things, and I have been nothing but thoroughly impressed with how quickly it has come up. We always talk about, do y'all need generators? Because everywhere we've been, we've needed a generator, and I've been completely impressed with the electric service here. It's been fantastic. And I've been here 8 years, so appreciate it.
So I guess to add to that, if people are experiencing those blips, please let the electric department know, because they have transferred back to that circuit being online. And really, we're still in a test phase at this point.
Anything else for the director's report? All right. Let's see, did that. Next is, I think, item 8, discussion recommendation on 2024 utility budgets, wastewater, water, and electric.
I'll open this up and I'll quickly turn it over to Dwayne and Randy, but I would just like to start by thanking Sam, Dwayne, and Randy for their immense amount of work on this budget. This is likely the most detailed utility budget that this board has seen from a line item perspective, and so it has pertained to going back through the past year budget, analyzing expenditure reports, allocating expenditures to line items, setting up the chart of accounts for and modernizing the chart of accounts for all the utilities. So this is what I believe to be a vast improvement in financial transparency for the utilities, as well as providing additional information to this board and the city council for their consideration when reviewing and ultimately approving the utility budget. So with that, I will pass it over to Randy and Dwayne.
I'm going to encourage Dwayne to take the lead on
Must have
this.
talked first. Must have taken the lead, yeah.
It was, for me personally, a pleasure to have Dwayne with me as we were going through this. I am used to very large budgets, but I think we made a lot of progress as we combed through a lot of the details and scrutinized a number of the items. And we see room to improve this for next year even, so. But we did make some changes overall for all departments. They're fairly close to last year's budget, if not right on. But, yeah, I'll let you speak more to it, Dwayne. You're more familiar with this budget.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Drake. And thanks, Sam, for all your work, Sam, on this. I know Sam's online. I'll try to summarize as much as I can in short bullet points. Let's start with the electric. Obviously, wages was and maybe Drake, you can touch on this, but wages were a very key factor to the general budget, but as well to the utilities. And so those items are many of the line items include a description that's called labor, and those are really fixed by that labor portion. Starting with electric on the revenue side, we are proposing a 3% increase on the revenue side. So we're anticipating, based on 2.74 net new construction, that the collections or the revenue in the electric utility will increase by approximately 3%. Now, there's two reasons why we did that: the 2.74 net new construction in '23, but as well the projected electric rate that we are applying for. The unfortunate part is the PSC is in a backlog. They're probably about 18 months out, if you recall, or could be as much as 18 months out. If you recall, you approved it in August, I believe. It's going through the process of the PSC right now. So we wanted to be careful on the revenue side how much we anticipated happening in 2024. So we were a little conservative and stayed at 3%. On the staffing side, as Randy mentioned earlier, we are currently at a foreman and 3 full-time linemen, so 4 full-time staff in the electric department. In each of these utilities, there's a number of other support staff involved, and it's portions of their salary that are included. For example, there's 1 meter reader, but it's 3 different utilities that reader is serving. And so there's portions of certain employees that are spread across multiple departments. So there's as many as 17 or 18 people that fit that role throughout the city structure that go into each of these utilities. But when you're talking about full-time staff, it's in the electric, it's 4. There is a 3% overtime number built into the labor side. We've estimated the purchased power to be 5.9 million. That is an increase from last year. Again, we're tracking this year's 2023 rate is actually under budget at this point. So we did increase it slightly. I believe last year's budget was 5.843 million. Of course, in the electric utility, that's the largest line item that you'll see on the expense side. Other points on the electric side, key things to think about are things that we've talked about. Obviously, there was a key factor with the increased wages. We will be looking at increased maintenance of some of the existing facilities. I think at previous meetings, we've talked about doing some pole attachment review and some of the structures with the poles. That's going to be a key point. As well as then also on the revenue side, having an increased focus on ways that, in addition to the rates, where are some revenue that we can collect that maybe we aren't collecting to the fullest at this point. And so there'll be an in-depth review of that, correct? Randy, is there anything more you want to talk about on the electric side?
No, other than that, we did identify some areas of revenue that had not been taken advantage of in the past few years. And so Dwayne and the electrical department has been putting together a map of some poles that we do rent out, and making sure that going forward, we'll start collecting revenue on these. So.
Do we want to talk about, I'm sorry, Greg?
On the electric, are we doing Milton Street in 2024?
Are we what, I'm sorry?
Is Milton Street on the
Yes.
24 agenda?
That's included in the current CIP.
Yeah.
Ideally, yes, we would in order to complete that before the Milton Street reconstruction.
Okay.
There'll be factors that can determine, on whether that comes to fruition or not, but the goal is certainly to complete the electrical work next year.
Okay.
Great segue. Thanks, Greg.
Sorry about that.
No, perfect. The capital improvement plan that was approved included 1.27 million for electric. The three major items, 200,000 for the Milton Street reconstruct, $500,000 for the first phase of that north side upgrade, and then also several $100,000 for a digger derrick for work that can be done. And of course, that would then be bonded, or at least it's proposed to be bonded. Correct, Sam? Yep. Sorry, Sam, So again, back to electric.
I'm here, Dwayne. Yes, you are correct. Bonded. I apologize. I was trying to get back to my screen. I was on the budget sheet.
Sorry, Sam. Any other questions regarding electric before we move on to water?
We did forget to mention that there's actually a fifth member of electric, the meter reader. Didn't we?
Yes, the meter reader is included in those portions.
No.
She is, I think what Randy is referring to is she works with the electric foreman, but she does serve multiple departments.
Yes.
And so when we're looking at the labor costs in these line items of expenses, that person is in 3 different utilities.
Her supervisor is the line foreman.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Organizationally, she is the meter technician is under the supervision of the line foreman, but is paid for out of all the utilities because they're reading the meters for each utility and servicing, repairing, all things meters.
Any other questions on electric? Moving on to water then, we'll use kind of the same format. We'll talk about some of the staff, a foreman and 2 full-time operators at this point. Again, those 18 portions or happen as well in water. Overtime is estimated at 3%. Revenue in the water department, if you recall, we're looking at the simplified rate increase going into effect January 1 of 2024. So the revenue on the water side was projected at 8% increase. So you'll see that all of the 23 line items have increased by 8%. The CIP, again, is rather small. If you recall, then Milton Street was removed. So there is actually only $9,000 in the CIP for some meter reading and GIS equipment for the staff to use. But at $9,000, that would be incorporated by the rate collection. It wouldn't be a bond for that $9,000. Again, some of the key points, obviously the increased wages, which was a focus, increased maintenance of the existing facilities, in particular, replacing some hydrants that Randy just showed. Some of those are, as you know, are well over 100 years old. Some of the facility itself. So where we can, we've also looked at increasing some of the maintenance of some pieces of mains. If you recall last year,
We're going to try and make that a focus for 2024. In reviewing the existing water delivery systems in the city, there are many hydrants that are old and past their service line, and plus another focus is 2024 is going to be the water meters and the replacements of those, modernizing, getting rid of the composite meters so we have a more accurate reading system and a less labor-intensive reading system. So, go on, I'm sorry.
thank you, Randy. In fact, if you wanted to continue on, I guess what he's talking about is the AMI meters is a refocus back on the water system. As you recall, many of the electric AMI meters have already been installed, but because of some chip issues and COVID, chip issues, supply chain, and staffing issues in the water department over the last several years, a refocus on the AMI changeout will be happening in '24.
So the water meter availability is better now?
There's still a significant lead time compared to 3 years ago, but we have received a very large shipment, so
Okay, Yep.
they're gonna have plenty to do for 2024.
okay.
The materials available for it anyway.
All right.
Chemical costs obviously have been increasing, and of course, on the water side, the lead service line orthophosphate change that was required, if you recall, that has gone into effect, and so we are seeing some increased chemical costs. So you'll see that line item increased in this budget. And then, of course, our funding for LSLs through the DNR, and Travis mentioned earlier today that because of our MHI, our median household income, we're not in line for another funding mechanism for the private side LSLs. We did continue to do that through this year with the funds that were left over. And although we haven't as a staff done the end of year report, we are likely in the 75 range for public side and somewhere in the 150 range for the private side as far as lead services in the system. Any other points, Randy, that you'd like to touch on?
No, sir, not in water. That's good.
Any questions from the board on the water budget? So we'll head into wastewater, and Bill is here if he wants to add anything. But again, staffing-wise, you have your foreman and 2 full-time operators. You currently have a 1 open position that is included in the budget, and there is a one part-time lab operator that's included as a part-time person in the budget. Again, you have those portions of other staff members throughout the city. Overtime is estimated at 6% on the wastewater, a little higher this year because of staffing issues and concern with that open operator. But if that can get filled, potentially that number can be lower. Part-time is included for the one-time or the part-time lab operator at the moment. That is also included in the budget for '24. Revenue, again, going back to the new construction at 2.74, we've used 3% as a revenue increase. And depending on the conversations and how this board and the council proceeds with some of the topics that Travis had earlier today, we felt we should stay at 3% on the revenue increase, but obviously a rate increase anytime in '24 would change that. As far as cost, capital improvement plan, similar to the water, except in this case there is also a portable generator for the lift station use. That is in the capital budget. Again, I think on the wastewater side, we're not looking at bonds for this minimum amount of $34,000 in the capital improvement plan. Again, some of the key points, Randy, jump in when you'd like. the focus on increased wages, increased maintenance of the existing collection system, and the chemical cost increasing throughout the years. Randy?
I just wanted to add, and as Dwayne and I were going through the wastewater's budget, we started moving, making availability for focusing in 2024 on updating some of the delivery system. There are a number of pumps that are antiquated in the lift stations. Bill and I are going to be looking at replacing a number of these and repairing some of the larger ones that are more expensive. This is going to be a priority, and so we made the availability possible in those accounts that pertain to that. Chemical costs, again, have been going up for the last 3 to 4 years, so we did increase that bucket as well. But this will be a focus for 2024, is lift station maintenance and just delivery maintenance, and that is primarily focused on pumps and such.
I saw sludge hauling costs year over year increased.
Yeah, well, we're expecting a decrease, at least for 2023. We worked with Bill on this very item. Bill helped us a good deal with the whole budget, but this was an item that he feels we were able to find some savings and move into another account. So.
The labor's actually going up significantly.
Yeah, well, when we fill this operator position, the labor will go up, yes. Is that what you mean, Greg? I'm sorry.
Well, as we look at the line item for sludge hauling labor, it was 91,000 in '23. In '24, it's projected to be 170.
I beg your pardon, I'm sorry.
Greg, great question again. So as Sam moved each of the items that have labor in them, in the chart of accounts into each of these budgets, what we tried to do was use historical values and take, let's say I'm going to just use a round number. Let's say all of the wages is 100,000. It's not, but let's say it's that. Each of these get a percentage of that 100,000. The budget is a projection of where we think those costs might be, but the technology that Sam and her staff have with the collection of data on the timesheet process, what is actually incurred to do each task will get put into the line item that each one, where it happens. And so the goal, and Sam and I and Randy have looked at it, is over time, we're going to have more history to be able to say, this amount of time in this week went to sludge hauling. Maybe in another, each year, our goal is to be a little more accurate on that distribution of labor. Does that make sense, Craig?
Well, you're adding a staff member in '24, correct?
We are. So
is that being shown primarily on this line item?
We just talked about this right before the meeting, right, Randy? I think if you look at each item, we try to distribute the labor. Is it exactly 100% of what it's going to be? Probably not. But if you take all of the labor items and add them together, they match what is proposed as staff. Does that help explain?
Yeah, some of the labor is actually down.
Yes.
And some of it's up.
Right, for some utilities, it's up, and for other utilities, it's down.
Right.
Sweater, it's down. The other one's
So like
up.
meter reading labor is down in waste, or admin in general is down in wastewater, but it's up in water and electric.
The only clarification I would add is that we're filling a vacant operator position that we haven't been able to fill. So we're projecting we'll fill it. We're not creating a new one. It just has been vacant for some time.
I apologize, Greg, if I interpreted the question incorrectly.
I was just trying to expand on what Mark was asking, what I thought he was asking, so, yeah.
Any further questions on the utility budgets? Good. If not, we should, somebody would like to make a motion to recommend approval of it.
Motion to approve the City of Lake Mills utility budget for 2024. To
Second?
move to, I guess would move to City Council.
Yeah.
Second?
Okay, motion and second to approve the utility budgets for the city council. Any further discussion? If not, roll call, please. It's our first roll call tonight, I think.
Madison, we can't hear you.
Very light. Can't really understand.
Dan will take roll.
Mr. Balcher? Aye. Mr. Picard?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Mr. Quant?
No.
Oh, Mr. White, excuse me, that's what I was worried about, my mistake, I apologize. And Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Thank you, 5-0.
Okay. I think we're down to item 9, recommendations for future agendas.
Yeah, the city bike plan was something that came up in city council, and it was referred to Public Works prior to the working of the comprehensive plan. As the comprehensive plan's coming to a close, it seems like it'd be proper to look at the city bike plan moving forward, the city bike plan moving forward.
So we have a bike plan that's very old, is that correct? So we,
Correct. So for the
It's
next
just-
meeting, what we could do is we could present what currently is the bike plan. Staff does not at this time have recommendations for any changes to it, but we can provide a refresher on what's in it and then perhaps set next steps for what this board would like to see staff put together for future consideration.
that sound good, Greg?
Sure.
Yep, that sounds good.
And then, of course, we'll have the follow-up on the wastewater treatment plant.
Yep, yep.
Do you guys have anything for the next meeting?
Randy?
Not at the moment. Obviously, something will come to mind. You're talking about agenda items?
Yep,
Okay, yes.
I think, yeah, we'll focus on those two and I'll communicate with the chair if other items pop up as well.
Can I add something? I should have asked this back in the director's report, but an update on the yard waste center would be something of interest. And then I happened to find a memo in some materials over the weekend that was talking about finding radium in our water back in early 2020, 2019, 2020. So just kind of something I would be interested in is understanding what we measure, how we measure, what are our, like, I'm not familiar, and if there's somewhere on the website where I could go and learn more about how we manage I would say our utilities, water and electric, regarding points of failure, quality. Is there a scorecard? Should we be talking about a scorecard? That would be something of interest, not necessarily a sense of urgency behind it, but just of interest as we're kind of accountable, I think, for that on a broad scale as a board.
That wouldn't be a problem. We can put something together. I was educated somewhat on the issue that Lake Mills had.
Yeah.
I just came from a year and a half of dealing with PFAS in municipal water, so I would much rather take on this issue of radium.
Well, it appears as if it was mitigated. It was only one well. I mean, it was not.
Right.
It just caught my attention that I am not really informed in this space, and I think I should be, and I would be of interest and of value. And again, if there's some place, if this isn't the right forum, I'd be happy to take that offline, but I feel there's probably some critical information that is available or that you look at or that should be looked at regarding quality and
Yeah, I think we can put together.
safety and a whole bunch of things.
Put together a presentation on what our annual testing entails and what we're testing for and how we incorporate that into our annual maintenance and annual processes. Well, we can put something together on that.
The remediation efforts that were made, so.
The consent order from the DNR.
Yeah.
It's with regard to water specifically, the radium issue. We're under a consent order from the DNR. I believe that is satisfied and that there's no notices of an exceedance at this point. I'm actually not even sure that there was a legitimate exceedance at that point in time, but we went on with remediation anyway because it was basically a cheaper option and it was it made sense to engage in that manner with regard to radium specifically. So I feel like that issue is well settled at this point. There is information from board review and city council review at that time. We can certainly bring a refresher back. With regard to PFAS, none of our wells have tested to a level where remedial action is necessary, and actually there's not an established standard that has been adopted both federally and at the state level. But we haven't received any notice that we have to address an issue there. And if there is any PFAS in our wells specifically, it's kind of at the de minimis range right now. But that is certainly an issue that is top of mind and will continue to be a contemporary issue that we continuously test for. This is something that's really world-changing right now with regard to PFAS specifically. So lots going on in the world of water, for sure.
Okay. All right, if there is nothing else, then I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.